I remember the moment with a clarity that still aches, as if humiliation has a flavor you can never quite wash away. I was cutting strawberries into perfect little fans for the display case at the bakery, head down, sleeves rolled, the glossy fruit staining my fingers. The morning air of Nairobi filtered in through the half-open window, brushing against my cheek like it was apologizing for the words that filled the shop. "Hess, look at that focus," muttered Mr. Mutiso, my boss, a man built like a flour sack, always on the edge of splitting, voice carrying farther than you'd expect. "George, tell us, are you assembling a masterpiece for the Queen, or just another cake for village gossip?" His daughter Mercy flashed her white teeth, stifling a laugh. The other staff busy behind the counters didn't even look up. This was routine, George with his big ideas, the punchline of every early morning shift at Mutiso's bakery. "Let the boy dream," she replied, her voice like a spoon clicking on marble. "Maybe next time he'll bake a cake that doesn't slump at the edges." I kept my hands steady, sliding the strawberries onto a tart, pretending not to hear. Nairobi mornings can be flinty, the sun barely warming the red dust in the alleys, but inside that bakery, the true cold came from the people. I did not answer, my mouth was dry, tongue stuck to the roof. I focused on the dance of my knife, the breath in and out. Some dreams you nurture in the dark because the world's light when it lands is the kind that scorches. By noon I had scrubbed pans, wiped counters, endured Mr. Mutiso's snide asides. "Maybe Paris wants a boy like you, but here you're just another pair of hands," and I left with flour on my sleeves and a quietness that steadied me. I walked home through the crush of matatus and shouting boys hawking sodas, holding tightly to the idea of something sweeter than ridicule. I lived with my mother and brother beside the railway in Kybra, in a cramped room with thin walls and thicker voices. The world outside was a jumble of corrugated iron roofs and hanging laundry, kids kicking stones, the smell of smoke and fried dough drifting from the stalls. Mama stood at the sink, her hands submerged in a bucket. She looked over her shoulder as I entered, and I could tell she had heard, as she always did. Word traveled through the neighborhood faster than a rumor at market. "So you are home early," she said quietly, eyes not meeting mine. "They said I could leave when finished." She sighed, rinsed her hands and wiped them on her skirt. "Did you remember the milk?" I placed the bottle on the counter and began to slice tomatoes. The silence stretched, heavy and rough, only the sound of chopping and my brother Evan's video game filling the space. Later, as their voices thinned into the background, my mind replayed every mocking word. Somehow, the sound of Mercy's laughter strung more than my boss's contempt. I had applied to cooking schools, real ones in Europe, places that felt like myths. Every evening I read about Pierre Hermé, Dominique Ansel, Iginio Massari, as if repeating their names could turn hope into reality. When the rejection letters came, I waited until everyone was asleep to read them, each line a black mark, but I did not let the dream die. I watched foreign chefs on my phone, learned to whisk egg whites by candlelight, stole scraps of flour and sugar to practice until my hands ached, and my mother's gentle worry curdled into fear. She said it outright one morning, sitting on the edge of my bed before dawn, the light pale and merciless. "George, you are a good boy, but this," she gestured at the battered whisk on the windowsill, "this is not the way, you will starve. People will laugh, say you are mad." I listened, I understood, but hope was a small ember I cupped in both hands, refusing to douse. The years stretched. I turned 22, then 25, still working at Mutiso's, running errands, baking bread while Mr. Mutiso's laugh echoed down the hallway. Each birthday Mama bought me a new shirt. Evans grinned and said, "Maybe this year you'll finally bake that Eiffel Tower cake." Jokes slipped over the wound, but I kept working, saving every shilling. In quiet corners I entered online baking competitions, lost, then won a regional prize. Nobody cared, not even my family. The real prize was hope. The letter from a judge in Johannesburg saying, "You have something, keep pushing." One night, unable to sleep, I wrote to a Michelin-starred chef in Paris. An email full of broken English and dreams, flour-smeared hopes, a photo of a mango tart shaped like an acacia tree. For weeks there was only silence, then a reply, an offer to apprentice, unglamorous work, no pay. I needed to get there myself. I sold my phone, borrowed money from an aunt I barely knew, found a cousin in France whose living room floor I could sleep on, and left for Paris. When I told Mama, she wept not with pride but with dread. "They will chew you up. Come home when you fail," she whispered, pressing a small cross into my palm. At the airport, Evans shrugged, hiding his eyes. "Don't forget us when you're on TV, eh?" I hugged them, heart pounding, promising everything and nothing. Paris in winter is a knife of cold, raw and unfamiliar. The first weeks I did dishes and swept floors and burned 2 fingers learning to caramelize sugar. The chef, a man named Luke, rarely spoke. Sometimes he watched while I piped meringue, eyes sharp as a bird of prey. Once he nodded, almost imperceptible. It felt like rain on parched soil. The city itself was a blur, ornate bridges, grey skies, living on bread and dreams, calling home with borrowed phones, telling Mama little, just that I was safe, yes, yes, learning. Most nights I fell asleep aching, wondering if everyone had been right. Then one morning, Luke placed a basket of apricots on the table and said, "Show me something from Kenya." My breath caught, I thought of memories. Sun-warmed fruit stalls, Mama's chai, the way Evans licked the bowl when I baked. With trembling hands I prepared a short crust, simmered apricots with ginger and cardamom, arranged them in a fan and glazed them with honey. The sugar crackled under the torch, the colors shone. Luke tasted it, face unreadable, eyes fixed somewhere above my head. Then he slid the tart to the next chef, a silent command. The entire kitchen buzzed, murmurs in French and Swahili from a Senegalese cook. Someone clapped me on the shoulder. Later, Luke said only, "You can stay." I stayed. I rose before dawn, learned to temper chocolate, to trust my instincts. My work changed, sharper, bolder. Over months I began to climb. First I was allowed to assemble dessert plates, then to design a special for the menu, mandazi profiteroles with chai ganache. I watched disbelief turn to grudging respect. When the press came to review, Luke mentioned my name. My desserts were praised in a small article. I cut the column out, sent a photo to Mama. Her reply was simple. "God be with you," Evans wrote, "big man. Just come home someday with a suitcase full of those fancy sweets." Success grew, slowly at first. Luke arranged for me to compete in a televised patisserie competition. I stood in a gleaming kitchen, bright lights on my skin, hands steady as I whisked passion fruit curd, pressed dough into tart rings, remembered the weight of Nairobi's laughter and all the ways I was told I would fail. I did not win, but I placed second, featured in Le Monde, my face and accent unmistakably Kenyan. Bookings at the restaurant surged, my phone filled with new opportunities. One evening after midnight, Luke poured 2 small glasses of wine and nodded to the twinkling city through the window. "You are ready," he said quietly. "Open your own." Anywhere. It was then, with the world stretching out, that my thoughts returned to Nairobi, the city I'd left behind, the family, the neighbors, all who'd called my dream absurd. The pain hadn't faded, only dulled by distance. I wanted them to see not just what I'd achieved, but what persistence could become, so I returned. Not immediately. First I worked, saved, called lawyers, secured a small grant, planned my own patisserie in the city's heart. All the while I sent money home, paid for Evans' vocational college, phone calls with Mama growing softer, warmer. "Will you visit?" she asked once, voice trembling like the last note of a hymn. "Yes," I promised. "Soon." When the day of opening came, the Nairobi sun felt sharper than I remembered, streets busier, and the smells, diesel, roasting maize, rain-soaked red earth, enveloped me, part memory, part reality. I stood outside La Embargo Patisserie, the seed, the name hand-painted in golden script above the glass door. The interiors glowed with warm light and polished wood, every table fresh with lilies. My menu told a story: lemon cardamom tartlets, tamarind macarons, passion fruit chew, each piece shaped by memory and longing. An invitation went out discreetly, an advert in the Standard, leaflets at Mutiso's bakery, a message pressed into Mama's hand, Evans grinning as he spread the word to old classmates. I did not expect them all to come, but I hoped a few would be there to see. Opening morning, Mama arrived first, wearing her best dress, eyes brimming. Evans stood beside her, tall and silent, pride and disbelief mixed on his face. The smells of brewing coffee, warm bread and sugar filled the air. Then others, neighbors I remembered, Uncle Eliad, even Mercy, now older, sharper. Most surprising, Mr. Mutiso himself, dressed in his crumpled white shirt, hands in pockets, gaze wary. Crowds gathered, curious. I donned my crisp new jacket, sleeves flawless, collar stiff, and stepped behind the open counter. I introduced myself, speaking Swahili and English, voice steady. I spoke about dreams, about failure and stubborn hope. I did not preach, I offered taste. With trembling hands I plated the first tart, mango-shaped like an acacia, spiced with cardamom and black pepper, glazed until it shimmered. I handed it to Mama. She tasted, eyes closing, lips pursed, a single tear slipping down. Evans took a bite, grinned, elbowed me. "Bro, this is mad. Mum, he made it, eh?" Customers sampled macarons, eclairs with Kenyan coffee cream, rosemary shortbread. The crowd's noise grew, surprised laughter and murmured approval, a quiet amazement settling over the room. I watched the faces, old school friends, neighbors, even the women who had once called me fanciful or idle. Their expressions changed as they tasted, skepticism dropping away, replaced by a yearning neither words nor time could disguise. The climax came when Mr. Mutiso himself, with a crowd watching, took a hesitant bite of a lemon meringue tart. His brow knit, eyes squinting, then unexpectedly he smiled, slow and real. The bakery's crew glanced at one another. Mercy, standing beside him, nodded, unable to keep a smirk from softening her lips. For a boy who used to burn his sponge cake, you've learned a thing or two, George, Mutiso said, loud enough for all to hear. His words, edged with begrudging respect, felt like a wound knitting shut. The crowd turned to me, hands surprised into applause. Even outside, people pressed against the windows. A TV crew, tipped off by word of mouth, filmed my hands as I piped pastry, asking questions about Paris and home, about dreams and the courage to fail. By noon, the shop was swamped, desserts vanishing faster than we could plate them, my team, Evans and 2 new hires from the neighborhood, working in sync as my early mornings at Mutiso's flickered through my mind. I caught Mama watching from a corner, hands folded, eyes shining proud, her past fears melted in the warmth of new belief. Later, after the last customer left, the sun angled gold through the windows, dust dancing in the air. Mama lingered, picking at the crumbs of a tart, her voice quiet. I was wrong to doubt, but I was scared for you, for us. She took my hand, pressing it tight. Years of struggle, fights, sacrifices, all folded into that grip. You made this, she said, gesturing to the shop, the laughter, the joy. You brought us something beautiful. Outside, the city pulsed, evening life blooming. My phone buzzed with messages from friends near and far, journalists asking for interviews, old chefs in Paris sending congratulations. But in that moment, surrounded by scent and sweetness, my family close, I felt a peace that eluded me all those years. The silence that had once been heavy was now full of love, of pride, of everything I had fought to earn. As night seeped in, Evans swept the floor, Mama washed plates, and neighbors debated outside what pastry really meant. I stood quietly behind the counter, watching the faces of those who once called my dream ridiculous, now tasting the proof of what resolve could make real. I no longer needed their approval. Still, as their eyes met mine through the glass, I nodded, the ache of old wounds fading into the sweetness of return. Here, in the heart of Nairobi, my dream bore its fruit, tender, bright, and unmistakably my own.